Time for another DraftScience video presentation. Just, you know, doing the let's respond to the liars and idiots videos. But anyway, it's all you got. There's no civil, rational conversation. But anyway, so I'll do a Stephen Bro comment in them eventually, hopefully. But I saw this other one by Science Thornton. Okay, so. And again, just such, just playing games with the truth. Just to fool people, to lie, to imply that something is applicable when it completely isn't. It's just such evil bullshit. Okay. These two people are detached from reality. So instead of actually debunking the videos, that is, pointing out how the pattern really should be viewed on a flat screen, that's what the math is predicting. So instead of acknowledging that, yes, it's true, the math doesn't predict the pattern on a flat screen, that's one of the simple little facts. The simple little fact that the detector experiments were never conducted. There's no such thing in the annals of the history of science where anyone ever did let's detect an electron flying through space. Or let's detect a photon flying through space and see where it is and where it's going. And they can't even acknowledge those facts. Instead, do this crap. Okay. The two scattering effects in play here are Rayleigh scattering and Compton scattering. Why? Those are about dust particles. Okay, particles that contain thousands, if not millions, of atoms. And so we're really just talking about, you have a laser beam and you shoot it in a foggy room, or you just blow smoke, cigarette smoke. You blow smoke and you can see the laser beam. What are you seeing? You're seeing the scattering off of the particles. And clearly the scattering is at all kinds of angles, because no matter where you view it, the laser beam, you can see it. So, almost if you let the laser beam hit your chin, they're shooting it right at you and you let it hit you hit your chin, you can see the beam because it's scattering light in all directions. Truth. All right, so that's the fact, and he's just going to say a bunch of crap that's completely made up garbage. Okay, when you bounce things off electrons, so there's no evidence of Compton scattering or Rayleigh scattering having anything to do with bouncing light off of electrons. That experiment's not been done. Think Compton scattering. Why? It doesn't apply to electrons. Oh, so think of it anyway. All right. So instead of conceding something simple, the argument about surfaces bending light is so obvious in the sense we already know surfaces do that. We already know that every single transparent medium that you put light into, the light is bent. And depending on the density of the material, what it's made out of, it's bent different amounts. And depending on the frequency of the light, it's bent different amounts. So we already know surfaces bend light. Not complicated. All right, that wavelength is approximately 2.4 times, so he knows how big an electron is, right? He measured one. Yeah, okay. That means it cannot have been detected by the eye. So he's claiming somehow, okay, that somehow it doesn't scatter light. Electrons don't in any way participate in the production of light. So he's discounting the whole thing by pretending he doesn't have to deal with the actual argument made, which is that the photon is a composite object made out of elements and that the elements interact with electrons. But he's not acknowledging that as the theory. So anyway, so if you see the interference pattern on the screen, it's not Compton scattering. Well, who claimed it was? So you're the one saying Compton scattering, which has to do with bouncing light off big giant particles like dust, has something to do with the theory of how light bends on surfaces, or how electrons bound in atoms react when they, what their individual participation is in the creation and absorption of the energy of a photon. These people think a single electron produces a photon. which is nonsense. Okay, there's just no evidence that can happen. As I pointed out, the polarization of the photon tells you it can't happen. The polarization of the photon is 1,000 atoms in its dimensions. How does a single electron, 1,000,000 times smaller, cast something that flies straight through space that's that giant? Doesn't make any sense. He doesn't give us an answer. Anyway, no electron on the surface, diarrhea, says you. So, and you haven't said it with anything rational. Okay. Hence, we get the ignorance semantics of the interference pattern caused by the two-slit experiment. I don't know. What does this sentence even mean? Okay, so I can't respond to it because it's incomprehensible drivel. Rayleigh scattering is the scattering of light seen by the eye, like a sunset. So, and he thinks what the light seen by the eye didn't do what? That is, it was reflected off of a surface. And you think the surface it was reflected off of was a single electron. Where I'm arguing the whole point, the whole fact that you see the light is the fact that the surface had to be big enough for the whole photon to get into it. Just like a water droplet creating in the rainbow, the water droplet has to obviously be made out of millions of atoms. However, Rayleigh scattering does not explain the two slits. So again, where is there any indication in physics that the only two ways you can scatter things are Rayleigh and Compton, which are both theories about different sized particles of dust and other matter? They're not about atomic scattering. Anyway, that's what the physicists faced in the early 20th century, and one factor opening the door for experiments that began the understanding of quantum mechanics. So there's no experiments we're going to be cited here, no explanations. The whole thing is a big fat fucking pile of fairy tale. Okay, you have no evidence that any photon breaks into two things and interferes with itself or any of that crapola. Nothing. You have no experimental evidence. Okay. Oh, please, Google Compton. Yes, please, go look up Compton scattering, Rayleigh scattering, and you'll see it has absolutely nothing to do with scattering off of electrons. And prove these guys nuts on your own. Yes, just prove that this guy is obviously a liar, okay, who can't compose a real argument. He's just a petty person. Who's just being a naysayer, and so he can't articulate a real argument to any of the real, arguments that have been made, pointing out, how the experiment fails. So instead of conceding that the two-wave math doesn't explain the double slit experiment, which it doesn't, it has no hope of explaining why there's two patterns. It can't do it. And the only math that works to explain the two patterns is the four-source math in the double slit experiment. Now that's a fact, and he won't deal with that fact. He won't explain how that fact doesn't mean anything. So why doesn't he show me in the Young analysis where Young accounted for the two patterns? Well, that's right, he didn't. Well, why don't you show me in Feynman's lecture where he accounted for the two patterns? Oh, that's right, he didn't. Why don't you show me somebody's video where they account for the two patterns? Oh, that's right, it doesn't exist because you can't account for it because your physics fails. Oh, you're such a weasel. All right, let's see what the reply is. Oh, of course. Oh, shit for brain. Let's see what kind of lies he has in this pile of shit. Thank you for clarifying. So he thinks that was a clarification. To bring up refraction off of dust particles has something to do with electrons. Okay, I've always wondered which kind of scattering was supposed to apply here. So obviously neither kind, because electrons aren't big giant pieces of dust made out of millions of atoms. Yeah. I mean, how many atoms do you think are in a piece of dust? Okay, a tiny, tiny piece of dust. It's the Earth apple versus atom apple thing, I mean, a tiny piece of dust isn't a buckyball even. It's not 50 atoms. It's, you know, hundreds of thousands at least atoms. Their whole surfaces, you frickin' idiot. Anyway, was supposed to apply here with so many specific kinds of scatter being detailed by the likes of Michael Van Briesen and many others, of course. So somehow, you know, I can't believe that this moron has watched Michael Van Briesen videos, because you should glean enough to know the physics is crap just from those videos, in the sense of how much is ignored. Again, where does Michael Van Briesen deal with the double slit pattern? Where does he show the two envelope pattern and the other pattern and explain how two waves created? Oh, that's right, he doesn't. And does he in fact actually point out the math that does work, which is the math that requires you to do the integrals? All right, so go into depth that I have to admit I cannot honestly properly follow. There we go. Despite trying. So he's conceding, oh, I don't get it. Because guess what? Compton scattering isn't about bouncing light off of electrons. It's about bouncing light off of substances with a ton of atoms. So the relatively short overview type explanations of Michael Van Briesen suit me a little better. Well, whatever. But even then, I have to keep returning to a refresher and get a little confused between, let's see, Mealy scatter, etc., etc. I was planning on doing some microwave experiments demonstrating Bragg scatter, mainly because I have a book with that in it, encouraging us to construct this and many other microwave versions to demonstrate scatter and other phenomena at a much larger, more convenient wavelengths. And again, what does it have to do with you understanding anything to do with how exactly photons are created, whether they're microwaves or light, and how they're received? You're still a moron who thinks it's a fucking goddamn wavy blob or whatever. What do you think it is? Oh, that's right, he won't tell us what he thinks it is because he's such a coward. He won't accept being critiqued as shallowly and as pitifully and as pettily as he critiques. He won't provide the opportunity for that because he's a fucking coward. He'll throw his little dirty lying rocks, okay, from behind his little screen, and he'll never show himself to be hit by one of those scurvy little rocks because he's a petty weasel. Yeah. I tend to cut Zohar a lot more slack, so to speak. Why? He's making an argument. He's going to make the argument. You ought to make it well. You ought to be informed. And the fact is, he's not on some of these subjects, and it's kind of fucking annoying. I mean, the fact that he doesn't know that you can create a double slit pattern by putting soot on a glass slide and then, scratching lines in it. That he doesn't understand that opaque is opaque. It doesn't matter how thick it is. Opaque means it's a wall, right? I mean, if you were talking about water waves, you wouldn't say, how thick is the wall? It doesn't matter how thick it is. All that matters is it blocks the water. If it stops the water, it's a wall. Yeah, it has a surface where the wall is working, and then over here there's no wall and the wall isn't working. Obviously, there's a transition between where it works and it doesn't work. Oh, fuck. Then Gary. Well, fuck you. Because Gary has decades to perfect his theory. Yeah, I've had decades to create it. Okay? Is Zohar creating anything? Oh, wait a minute. No, he's not. Oh, shit. And figure what you have just enlightened us with. So, Zohar enlightened us. Is that the argument? He didn't tell us what Gary said. He instead thought of it himself, created it, and then explained it. Is that what he did? Did he spend 10 years drawing fucking goddamn shit on paper and trying to figure out how mechanically it worked? No, I did that, fuckhead. I mean, this guy is just such a fucking piece of shit. Seeing as Gary touts himself as some great expert. Now, I tout myself as being able to get right answers instead of foolish, idiotic, moronic, baby, fantasy, silly, disgustingly ugly nonsense answers like photons are entangled and can read each other's minds. Yeah, that crap. Those are suck shit answers, and it's humiliating to be among assholes like you that believe that crap. It's like believing in fucking pixies or Tinker Bells. You're all living in some Peter Pan Queerville. You know. And he really does use the term expert or expertise. What the fuck is he even talking about? Where the fuck is he going to find those videos dominating? I think I've said things like photons are composite objects a hell of a lot more times than I've ever said the word expert, you fucking liar. With reference to himself on all double slit experiment matters. Yes, what I'm saying clearly is obviously you people have had since Newton, okay, we'll say since the discovery of the fact of the pattern, Newton discovered the pattern. Let's concede the truth, please. Okay, that Newton was the guy who pointed out, hey, there's fringes created by surface thingies. Yeah, things with surfaces create fringes. All right, and then Young came along and did absolutely nothing new, okay, and you all said, oh, what an amazing experiment. He doesn't even account for the real pattern, all right, and so you've had 200 plus years to come up with something called a reasonable explanation, and the best you can do is, the photon goes through a single slit and splits in two and makes two waves, and the waves interfere with each other even though forces don't interfere with forces, and they cancel and stuff, and blah blah blah, and then it goes everywhere in the universe and then decides to land over there because photons can do math. Fuck. Anyway, where was I? yeah, I don't know. Okay. So, yeah, the fact is I am an expert on the two slit because, as I've pointed out, I mean, you go out and survey the human race and you're not going to find, like, somebody who has watched more videos, researched more physics papers on the double slit experiment than I have. I mean, I have searched for every single little reference you could find, and, so I am sort of an expert in the sense that, yes, I have seen a ton of them, okay, searching for the answer, okay, and he really does use the term expert, okay, well, whatever, and other matters too. Yet I am quietly confident Gary knows next to nothing about which kind of scatter he is supposedly explaining in his theory. There's no kind of scatter that has anything to do with electrons because you idiots don't understand that the universe is made of stuff called forces and stuff called matter. So unless you can do that, unless you can show me where your conventional notions have anything to do with the forces ever being real things. So if you want to show me, like maybe quantum field theory might account for a kind of scatter. But obviously they don't account for anything real, so there's no point in, there's no point in researching it. But why don't you show me scatter experiments done with single electrons? Why don't you just show me that? Fuckhead. Zohar, on the other hand, is young and heavily influenced by Gary's strong will, so it's just more of this bullshit that I've hypnotized people. That's why they think it's reasonable. It's because I hypnotized them. No, they heard their story, and like me, they said, what the fuck? This isn't an answer. The photon splits in two. And again, they could figure out something I could figure out, which is when somebody especially says it to you, that there's no two-wave theory that creates the double slit pattern. Two waves aren't going to work. There's no way to take that retarded simplistic math and make that geometry create two patterns. Doesn't happen. Has no hope of happening. Doesn't work. So why do they keep drawing it the wrong way? Oh, that's right, because they don't have a rational theory. Quite obviously. All right. And overconfident attitude. What a pile of shit. So Zohar has, on a number of occasions, taken 5 lessons from Gary, which we have all been privy to. So yes, and he's also watched some of the videos. Obviously, he hasn't watched many of them because I actually did the soot on the 2 slit experiment. That's one of my videos. All right, Gary has told Zohar such gems as photons are huge. Yes, that's correct. They have a gigantic polarization. Where did you dispute that fact? That the polarization of an object is proportional to the wavelength. Whether it's half the wavelength, as you wish to argue, or whether it's the entire wavelength, it doesn't matter because it's still hundreds of atoms of polarization, retard. Now, where did you demonstrate anything otherwise being true? Where did you demonstrate photons hit single electrons and reflect off of them? Where did you show that experiment? Oh, that's right, you didn't do that experiment. And even if you did, you do it so badly that it wouldn't be worth anything. All right. And photons are tiny. Well, that's obviously a reference to the fact that the bits inside... Look, it's not my fault Einstein used this word, okay? And so it's Einstein's fault that he termed these things photons, because it does fuck up the game. They're not a ton. They're made of tons. Okay, so, I mean, again, some people call atoms particles. Do you think an atom is a particle, technically? Isn't an atom basically just some protons and some electrons? So, again, there's no confusion. Zohar understands. I understand the distinction. We understand that the elements of the photon must be very small, okay, and that just like an atom, the elements of the atom are very small, little tiny bits. A tiny percentage of what we call an atom is actual physical pieces of matter. You're just such a petty weasel. Have no size, and photons have no size. So that's just a lie. Okay, I never said that. All said within a few minutes in the same lesson. So again, so instead of quoting what I said, which was probably perfectly rational, explaining how they're composite objects, and I use the word photon sometimes, just as this happens with, well, there's no point. I mean, anybody reasonable understands. We just have this word photon, and so sometimes you're going to use the word to describe the elements of the thing. And yeah, that's not quite right, but you know, reasonable people can figure it out. Followed by electrons are huge, then you've guessed it, electrons are tiny. They're huge compared to the force. Now, it might be the other way around. It might actually be that the energy is giant and the electrons are minuscule, okay? But there has to be a relationship between the two that is different, okay, in terms of the sizing. Because the fact is that stuff does penetrate surfaces and then reflect off different layers of the surface, and you have to explain how it missed one and it hit the other. So there has to be some kind of sizing relationship. If you can't figure that part out, then you're pretty fucking stupid. But we already know that. Anyway, if you think there is a better set of lectures than Michael Van Briesen's one, so again, I played them. Where did he explain the 2 patterns in the double slit experiment? Oh, that's right, he didn't. Okay, the ones that come under the umbrella of particle physics, with about 40 or 50 short videos breaking the topic down into bite-sized chunks of absolute bullshit. So you're defending quantum theory. So I guess Stephen Bro believes in magic tons. Okay. As opposed to his other references to Compton scattering under the heading modern physics. So here he keeps doing this. If I remember correctly, which you won't because you're a liar, the former gives a wider overview, I think covers more types of scatter, although I don't recall. So again, and scatter over what? Are you talking about scatter on an electron scattering a photon? And the whole argument is that obviously I'm saying it's scattering the composite bits of the photon. It doesn't scatter an entire photon. But at any rate, if you know of any better, and he knows this. In another comment, he's explaining to Zohar how, well, it's Gary's theory that the photon is a composite object. So he already knows what I'm arguing. And here he's misparaphrasing it on purpose. I think we might all be grateful, well, some of us, Thank you for your So he's looking for a better lecture. Why would you even bother if Van Briesen does it so well? Which he doesn't. I mean, I've played numerous of his videos. The only way this guy probably even knows about Van Briesen is because of me. Because I've played the videos. Thank you for your enlightenment. And so there's no enlightenment here. So he just said, thank you for your enlightenment. And the guy basically just said that there's only two kinds of scatter, and because those two kinds of scatter don't have anything to do with electrons, therefore electrons can't scatter. No. That's not called good logic. On this and previous issues, so more horseshit. The kinetic energy one specifically. Oh, let's go find that, please. Why don't you give me a link to that? Where's his kinetic energy argument where he defeated a single one of my arguments? Where he linked me to the experiment where they collected the extra energy. Where it was proven that the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour has only half the energy of a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour. Where was that demonstrated? Somewhere on planet Earth. Oh, that's right, it wasn't. I will be returning to that matter soon, incidentally, on my own channel. Yeah, we've heard your soon crap before. Yes, and you'll fail again to do anything correctly because you're an idiot, a retard, and an asshole, and a liar. Alright. So he leaves these links. So let's go see. Compton scattering has something to do with electrons. So let's see where it has something to do with electrons. Nah, we have to deal with the commercial, unfortunately. Oh, he has an electron here. So let's see. Where did they do that experiment? Where did they scatter light off an electron? Oh, no, that never happened.
Welcome to Electron. In our quest to understand what a photon is, we're now going to take a look at what we call the Compton scattering. So Compton had discovered when a photon would be approaching an electron, and if it approaches just right, it would be scattered by the proton in various angles depending upon the...
So he just said electron and then he said proton, so we have to discount his whole video because he said proton instead of electron. Okay.
Approach vector, good way to say it. And what was interesting was that the amount of energy lost by the photon as it was scattered would depend upon the scattering angle. So here we have...
right, so how much it scattered would be how much energy it lost, kind of obviously, right? So the more angular, the bigger the change in the frequency. So that's what they mean by energy. They don't mean speed, they mean it's losing energy because its frequency is going to change. All right, so and again, this is not done with anything called a single electron. This isn't done with electrons in any way, really. This is done based on assuming they're interacting with the electrons because that's the part of the atoms that create this effect. But I'm just saying, there's no experiment.
I have a little picture. We have an approaching photon. It's coming in contact, and I'll put that in quotation marks, with an electron.
Right, because he has to put in quotation marks because he has no idea that that's what really happens. So this is done over, this is just all theoretical physics. This isn't anything to do with an experiment done. Compton's experiments were done on particles of matter, okay, not on electrons.
So that the photon would be scattered in one direction and the electron would then be scattered in the other direction. And the change in the wavelength of the photon, which means they would lose some energy, the photon would lose some energy, is equal.
Let's understand, to see electrons, they have to put a gas usually into the vessel to actually see the electrons. Okay, so, it's whatever. Believe what you wish.
Equal to h divided by the mass of the electron times the speed of light times the quantity 1 minus the cosine of the scattering angle of...
Right, so again, it's just more much and demonstrates absolutely, it just points out exactly what I'm saying. So there's absolutely no reason to believe, okay, that photons aren't scattered by electrons. So there's nothing about Compton scattering that says it doesn't happen. It says that there's a subtle, tiny frequency change, and that the frequency change is so goddamn small that you couldn't see it. So the fact is this guy is basically arguing, right? The original comment is saying somehow this scattering theory means it can't be right because somehow the frequency change is imperceptible. Well, we're not talking about a change in frequency. We're talking about a change in direction. And as look at the drawing. The drawing has the directions rather radically changing. It doesn't say that the direction is infinitesimal. It's saying the change in the frequency is infinitesimally small. It exists, but it's very small. So you turn red light into, 500 nanometer light would be turned into 499 nanometer light. Okay, the effect is so small. That's what it's saying. That's what he's saying in this video. That's what Compton's scattering is saying. So even if they had done a real experiment, which they really didn't, again, it doesn't demonstrate how anything I've stated is incorrect or wrong, because clearly it's saying, yes, photons are scattered by electrons, and rather dramatically scattered. So that's confirmed. Look at the drawing. Photon goes in, photon comes out at a 45-degree angle. The electron leaves at a different angle. Now, obviously, if the electron already had momentum, those angles are going to be different, aren't they? Oh, yeah, then they're really going to change. So he's using an electron that isn't moving. How many electrons in the universe right now do you think are just standing still? How many do you think there are? Yeah. Oh, God, you people suck. Anyway. All right. So we really don't, there's nothing about most of these scatter experiments, like I said, are done with dust particles. It's dust in the atmosphere that does most of the scattering, obviously in water molecules, droplets, not just single water atoms. Okay. I'm curious where this fits in. Every time I search, I get distracted by Bragg himself being such an interesting person on other matters. Well, that one, if it's interesting to him, he must be something like a child molester. Yeah, I don't know. If only I were younger. Oh, but sadly, people my age and a lot younger are dropping like flies due to C19 here. Oh, yeah, it's so dramatic. No, that's right. It isn't really that dramatic. A bunch of people in poor health are being killed by a flu. Oh, okay. Big surprise, huh? All right. A friend died last night very unexpectedly. One who declined the vaccine. However, I'm straying into a different topic. Yes, you are. But suffice to say, I feel lucky to still be around thus far. My health is worse than most my age. Yes, that's right. You look, a lot older than you are. I'm older than him. I mean, it's ironically funny. Scary. I mention in the hope that younger people appreciate how short life is and make the most of it. Like you didn't get the same bullshit from the old farts back when you were a kid and you didn't pay any attention, did you? No. So, yeah, that doesn't work really. It feels long until you think your number is up, and many younger friends have gone. Yeah, that's right. And so what are you doing with your last days on this earth? Just being a lying sack of fucking smelly, turdy shit. Alright, and so I'm going to have it written on your fucking lousy, scummy tombstone just what a piece of fucking crap you were as a human being. Okay, because you are a disgusting fucking liar, and you're a petty, weak coward. Okay, you'll sit there and tear other people an asshole, okay, because they have the guts to say something, and you're sitting there like a coward, okay, afraid to tell us what your little magical theories are. You weasel. And then in the process, you're defending physics you don't even agree with. You coward. Alright, sorry, I appear to have brought up party atmosphere crashing down, whatever that is. Fuck. Lying scum. Alright, so this is where he really gets into being a lying scum. Alright, if you have a glass plate and paint it black, so you don't have to paint it, but obviously if you paint it black and the light doesn't go through it anymore, that means it's pretty opaque. It's a wall. And there's a transition between the wall and no wall, right? And that would be called a surface. There's a wall, and then there's no wall. Yeah, it's a surface. Anyway, you remove the paint in order to create a slit, you will also get this pattern. Yes, the problem is that, you know, even with the soot, I found anyway, is that you don't really realize that you're not really making a very good straight line. The soot, you know, creates lots of little tiny irregularities. So it does make a rather sloppy pattern, I found. However, there are now no surfaces to scatter the force bit. So so there's no surface. I've put an opaque substance that completely blocks the light, and yet there's no surface. Oh, gee, thanks for letting me know. How do you explain this then? So just a stupid comment. And so Zohar, who apparently doesn't know this, says, maybe the paint is thick enough to be a surface. Well, it's obviously thick enough to be a surface because it's blocking the light. Anyway, where did you find this experiment? Yeah, so it's all over the internet. I probably have it, one of my videos somewhere, and I guess I know I did it, and I know I filmed it, so I know one of the slit experiments, you're looking at my slits, one of them was created by that exact effect. So anyway, so Stephen the liar chimes in. Fuck. You have just reminded me that in one of Gary's many previous versions, so let's understand, the channel was called DraftScience, and it started with a gravity theory. Okay, so I started from pretty much nothing on the light, and the light only came up because, you know, it's an energy argument. And so I've stayed completely consistent in the 3 videos I've now produced that I'm paying people to try to debunk, and they won't take my money. Let's understand that. And certainly Coward Bro hasn't played those videos and explained how what's in them is wrong. The coward he is. So it's completely been a consistent theory in the basic idea that the universe is made of these little bits called forces, you know, the little particles, and that light is just the force with a pattern. So these basic arguments have always been the same, and I've just improved in terms of arguing how the forces interact with the matter bits. And that's it. That's the part that's changed. And this liar is implying that somehow it's radically changed. This liar would say the Wright brothers never perfected their airplane, right? So you have to judge them based on their first model. They never made a working airplane, right? Their first plane is the only plane they ever made, the one that crashes and just doesn't get off the ground. I mean, what a fucking weasel. You have just reminded me that in one of Gary's previous versions, so they're not previous versions, they're previous drafts of an explanation, and there were always good kernels in all of the drafts. Some of the drafts had stuff that didn't work out. It didn't finish. Okay, it was an idea, you glued it on the airplane, it didn't make it fly better, so you took it off. No big deal. Not so long ago, in fact. No, it's pretty long ago and you know it. He used to talk about some nonsense, so again it's nonsense, about electrons just floating about in the slit. So again, I didn't say anything about them floating about, so that's a lie. I said the electrons would be in positions relative to the protons and the atoms on the surface. And I still contend that's exactly why light bends going into a surface, is because the fact is the electrons are in a matrix. But regardless, completely ignoring the obvious point that the slits is almost never some empty space to which electrons are magically drawn to float about in. So again, never said they just float about randomly without any influences. I've always argued that electrons don't like to be in. Electrons will always be moved by the force. So if they're in a field and they're anywhere near a piece of matter, there's always more matter on one side of the universe than the other side. So just imagine an electron sitting somewhere. The argument would be there's always going to be a moon, there's going to be a planet, there's going to be some unevenness in the local field that's going to compel the electron to move in a direction. There's always going to be an unevenness in the charge field. And it isn't until electrons get close to something that they can find a balance in the field. But at distance, there's no balance. Even the slit, the gap, isn't glass or plastics, or plastic. Even the slits, the gap, isn't glass or plastic, which is it usually is in commercially available lab slits, even if the slit gap is air. I don't know what he's saying here. And well, air isn't exactly empty. So again, this doesn't have the idea that it would be nice to see the experiment done in a vacuum. Yeah, I think it'd be nice to see, but I'm not arguing that the air molecules are doing it. But anyway, so again, he's trying to go back 7 years ago or 6 or some other number of years ago and say I made some kind of bad argument. And I've already conceded some of the arguments I made in those past years weren't right. Okay, they got defeated. There was, in fact, some reason not to believe that to be the viable answer. And so, what does that mean? Does that mean something somehow? So again, he won't allow anybody to progressively improve something. You know, he'll just always sit there and say, if you had to improve it once, that means it's catastrophically flawed and it'll never be right. So again, the Wright brothers never invented an airplane because they never succeeded. Yeah, right, okay, fuck you. But he changed it so many times. I haven't changed it so many times. The basic theory that the universe is made out of force bits and matter bits has not changed, so he's just lying. It's never worth taking any version seriously. So the fundamental arguments that a photon was made out of the matter bits at a period, that there is no such thing as one big blob of photon, that's been around for 10 years. Because next month he'll be different yet again. So this is just a petty kind of pile of shit. We don't get to do the same thing to Stephen and his silly history because he's too much of a coward. Okay, so he won't put anything on the table to be mocked later. Now, he's already taken down some of his videos, okay, because he's a weasel. Okay, but now he's sort of stuck with it because I've said that. And in 10 years, maybe some of your experiments are going to look shittier and shittier and shittier in the context of this argument. And you're going to look like the real asshole. Okay. He tells Zohar off or repeating his theory of, say, gravity. Then Gary has changed it since he thought Zohar, and Zohar is somewhat supposed to know every time Gary changes his theory. So there's no argument here that somehow Zohar is outdated in his knowledge or some other kind of crap. The critique is pretty obvious, right? If somebody's going to argue your argument, you want them to argue it at least as well as you argue it. The whole point is if he's going to make another video on the same exact subject, he should be improving it, not unimproving it. He should be adding value, okay? Not taking value away. Duh. And I didn't exactly jump on his ass for it, did I? But he made a pretty fundamental error. I mean, labeling the on and offs wrong is pretty fundamental, isn't it? And I didn't get hysterical and say, oh, if you fucking asshole, take that video down, you retard. It's not my theory. Did I do any of that? No. You have to lie about everything. As if we all have an hour to waste every single day. Obviously, some people are interested in the subject. I would be fucking interested. I've proven that I'm willing to invest many hours, okay, if somebody can make a video. I responded to the stupid, retarded Richie guy who's watching his videos. Only an insane person almost will watch these people. I've given them the benefit of the doubt. I've watched their shit. I've watched the D. Hilster horse shit, okay? So, yeah, people are interested, asshole. To get right answers, that's what you have to do. You have to investigate the arguments. That's the whole fucking goddamn point. And I'm sitting here begging people, go ahead, take me on. Challenge me with an actual rational response. Do you think Piro has made a fucking video with a single piece of rational evidence in it? Where has Pirro made an argument to counter my arguments? Has he made one single one? Can you show me the one good argument Pirro made? Can you show me the one piece of evidence Pirro provided debunking anything I've said? No. I mean, you're such a piece of shit. All right, to troll through Gary's latest update on which he has changed today. So this is another fucking lie. I've only been emphasizing the fact that there's only 3 fucking videos you have to watch, and I've cut them down to 15 fucking minutes. So this lying sack of shit knows that's a fact. Okay, that a year ago I decided, okay, I'll make these videos, okay, on the subject. I'll make them really short. I'll do it as fast as I can, as concise as I can. This is the argument I want you to debunk. I've challenged people. I'm offering $1,700 on the website. Well, actually, I've made videos offering $2,000, and I've certainly sent emails offering $2,000, okay, for some physicist to counter-argue. And where is it? It doesn't exist because they're cowards like you and weasels like you, and they can't make any kind of stand-up argument against what I've said. Oh, you're so pathetic. So anyway, so those videos have been up for months. I haven't changed them any. I mean, I can improve them, and I think I will, a couple of them, because I, said something a little bit sloppy. But yeah, where's your counter argument to them? That's right, it doesn't exist. The update is those videos. So they obviously haven't had to be updated recently, have they? And no one's challenged them, have they? Where's your example of the great argument challenging anything in those videos? Where? Where has somebody shown what I've said in the video and then shown where that's not correct? Oh, that's right, it hasn't happened, you weasel. Gary uses the excuse that this is why the channel is called DraftScience. It's called DraftScience because that's exactly what it was. It was a draft proposal saying, let's find something better than this wooey, fake, fantasy, bullshit pixie science. It's all pixie science. If you don't, it's just such a pile of shit they're selling you. Bent space. What the fuck does that mean? How do you think an electron knows the space is bent? We can't see the bent space, but somehow the magical electron can. I mean, it's giving properties to things that doesn't make any sense. Do you really think electrons are more advanced in their functionality than we are? They have better radar and can see the bent space. Oh, fuck, you're such an asshole. Because he's still thinking it through. So this is just bullshit. I'm overtly making an argument that the physics I presented in those 3 videos is, miles ahead. They're all 3 of those videos deserve a Nobel Prize because they all add a contribution to recognizing the true function of the universe. Okay, the gravity one nails it. Okay. Gravity is just about an inequality in the fact that I am constantly reflecting the universe, and the fact is the universe took some time to move my little bits around, and therefore the reflection is less than what went in. So that's what causes gravity. It's a simple explanation. It does it all. It explains the inverse square law, explains all this shit, and then you can just use gravity to say, well, what if I put the little bits at a frequency? Well, bingo, I've got resonant functions, and now I can cause the glasses to break, for example. I mean, you're such a fucking piece of shit. Gary uses the excuse that this is why the channel, so it's called DraftScience for the deliberate purpose because I was challenging the conventional theory, and I'm challenging it from a beginning. I'm saying we know that's crap because it's just too silly, so let's find the right answer. It's not Sasquatch. The UFOs didn't do it. Again, pixies, gremlins. Their theory is pixies, gremlins, 3 blind mice, hoobies. That their theory is magical nonsense. Anyway, because he's still thinking it through. Anyway, that's bullshit. He is hardly ever says, I'm not sure. Yeah, because I'm never not sure. That's right. I mean, that's right. I hardly ever say it because the truth is sitting there just glaring, going bonk, bonk, bonk. I mean, it's something you can be quite sure. Okay, that there's no fucking ESP particles. Or take does or take this with a pinch of salt. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter what I said. The channel is called Draft Physics. The fact is that it is evolving and getting better and better and better. And I'm arguing it's flying now, okay? It is flying. The plane is flying. I've proven the concept. Proof of concept is in those 3 videos. I don't even have to prove the concept of the argument against kinetic energy because you have on your side 0 evidence. You haven't got one example of them showing a 60-mile-an-hour car lighting 4 times more light bulbs, than a 30-mile-an-hour car. You don't have it. You don't have any evidence that it takes 4 times more gasoline to go 60 miles an hour than it takes to go 30 miles an hour. You don't have any evidence of that. All right, anyway, which he never does anyhow. No, which you don't do, is produce anything called good evidence. He doesn't believe in the need for experiments for his theories. So, lie. The whole argument is about the experiments and how they should have done more of them. I'm not saying they shouldn't do the Eddington experiment. You're the one saying you don't need to do experiments. You're the one satisfied. Oh, it's been done. It's satisfactory. So what? He got 10% of the quality of photographs. 10% is really good. 10% is a lot. 1-0, that's a lot. Okay, it's not as much as 1-0-0, but it's still a lot. It's only missing 1 0. How much can 0 be worth? 0 doesn't add up to anything. A 0 is 0, so what? You're missing one of the zeros. Big deal. Have you countered this argument in any way whatsoever? No, that's right. You haven't made a single comment on the fact that the whole world believes photons are bent twice as much by gravity based on an experiment that's a sack of shit. Where the guy who did the experiment said in his own journal, I wouldn't stake my life on these results. No, he announces every theory with extreme gusto and pride and arrogance. Well, that's just, again, just a lie. The videos are a presentation of the evidence. So, again, it's just more lying on his part to characterize the videos as if I'm saying in all the videos, I'm right, you're wrong. No, that's not what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing when I'm talking to assholes like you. Because assholes like you are trying to say I'm a dumbass, or I'm wrong, or I'm this, that, or the other thing. You're the one who makes it personal. And the fact is it is offensive. You're an obnoxious, lying sack of smelly shit. Okay, anyway. A fact that mainstream physicists don't want to face or acknowledge or are too dumb to have realized, etc. So again, I'm not asking them to acknowledge that I'm smarter than them. I'm asking them to acknowledge that their arguments suck and they don't have any evidence. I don't want Pirro to say, hey, Gary, you're smarter than me. No, I want Pirro to concede his evidence absolutely sucks for every argument he makes. He doesn't have any. Okay. On a rare occasion, there is an element of truth in his claim. So again, this is just some vague reference to, oh, well, maybe he's right about all those things he says in the videos I'm afraid to challenge. I don't have the courage to play because I can't counter-argue anything in them. Why hasn't Stephen Bro, the videos are 15 to 17 minutes long. Why hasn't Stephen Bro, if he knows I'm so wrong, why doesn't he just play those videos and then explain how every section is wrong? That's just full of a bunch of wrong statements that can be proven wrong. Why doesn't he do that? Oh, that's right, because he's a fucking pathetic, lying sack of shit. He doesn't have any counter-argument. Anyway, say the curved screen issue. Okay, so this will be good. On rare occasions, there is an element of truth in his claim. Say the curved screen issue. Oh, okay, so he's saying that's one of the things I'm right about. They are not Gary's own ideas anyway. So again, he's making another claim for which he has zero evidence. That somehow he's saying it didn't occur to me. All right. Now the fact is, I have referenced the fact that I have some vague memory of like 20 years ago seeing a guy who actually did the experiment on a curved screen. But, does that mean because I have a vague memory when I think about it that I didn't sit there and actually do the thought experiment that said, well, the L distance in the equation can't change? That I somehow didn't realize that, well, if I go to a flat surface, when I go infinity, I'm going in an infinite distance. How can I make L an infinite distance? L has to be a fixed distance. I can't go an infinite distance, then have the same L in the equation. So I couldn't be comparing the geometry of that triangle because the L is too big. So obviously it has to stop somewhere here. It can't go all the way to infinity, can it? No, it can't. No, I couldn't have done that. And that's what triggered me to say, oh, wait a minute, yes, this whole thing gets distorted by the flat screen. And then I couldn't also associate it with Professor Lewin videos, and where he's talking about charge and he talks about infinite plane. They do lots of thought experiments in charge when they're talking about charges. And they do lots of thought experiments about what happens when there's an infinite plane, and the fact that on an infinite plane, light doesn't diminish by the inverse square law anymore. That no matter how far away you go from an infinite plane, okay, you get the same amount of energy. So the same hits me here as hits me here as hits me here if I had an infinite plane that was producing the light. Things like that. And then I didn't put those two things together. So that's not possible. You have factual, actual evidence, okay, that they're not my ideas. God, you're such a piece of scum. The curved screen thing is decades old. Okay, so we'll look this guy up. Walter Furrer even had a brilliant interactive demonstration of it 2 decades ago. Okay, so great. So this argument that and did this guy point this out in the sense of associated with these double slit experiments, and the fact that, because once you do the curved screen thing, it makes it kind of obvious that it's a finite pattern, right? And that the number of nodes, oh wait a minute, there's only a certain number of nodes, and it turns out that the number of nodes is exactly the same number that divide into the space of the slit. All of that stuff just falls from this recognition. So you're saying that this guy pointed that out 20 years ago, let's say, that the whole experiment now can be understood because you can understand that there's exactly as many nodes as there are wavelength differences. And so this becomes really simple to understand. And that the greatest difference in the distances between, surface A and surface B would be at 90 degrees, and that's where the first node is. Because those are dead straight lines right on top of each other. No, none of that. He changed this fucking comment, right? There was something in here on where he says he told me something about the fucking double slit experiment. Maybe it's a different, well, we'll see. Oh yeah, here it is, right here. Gary did not even know the term path length difference. So this is just such a lie. I mean, you hear it all the time. It's almost like in every professionally done, physics professor type. It's in the geometry. It's automatically a term used. That it has to be a wavelength of path length difference. I mean, it's such a fundamental concept. So this is just such a lie for him to say until he explained it to me. I mean, this is such a lie. Until I explained it to him a year ago. A year ago? I didn't talk to you a year ago, you fucking lunatic. I mean, what a fucking liar. And I certainly knew what it was more than a year ago. My video is almost a year old on the photon. So what a fucking lie. All right, when he finally realized the mainstream theory, which he had started claiming is his idea. What is this sentence? Okay, anyway. Until I explained it to him a year ago. So that didn't happen. That's just ludicrous nonsense. So he's saying he made some public video where he explained a path length difference in some way. This didn't happen. When he finally realized the mainstream theory, which he then started claiming is his idea. That, I can't even figure out what the hell. When he finally realized the mainstream theory, which he then started claiming was his idea. You can't even make sense out of that. If somebody can interpret whatever the fuck that mush was. Clearly, Stephen Bro explained nothing. He in no way advanced any of my knowledge about anything, except by buying those stupid radar things. I found out that they're run by a diode, which makes them suck. Okay, for doing experiments, because the diode obliges everything to fit, conform to its vibrating frequency. So they're totally useless in the sense that you really can't adjust. All right. I had to tell him this already has a name. So this is just such a pile of shit. This didn't happen. Path length difference is not some Stephen Broism. So now he touts it around as if he always knew the term. Yeah, the term has been around since this two-slit experiment's been around. I don't even know how he could make this argument that the path length difference, it's in the geometry. The whole point is you draw a line this way and you draw a line this way and you see how, oh, this line's a lot longer. That means it has to travel further. I mean, how could he say I didn't know that 10 years ago? Of course I knew that 10 years ago. I mean, fuck, what an idiot. Oh, he's so petty. So now he touts it around as though he always knew the term and he's simply applying it to his own theory. I mean, again, it's fundamental to the geometry. It's always been an argument about geometry. How could you argue any of the slit experiments without arguing the path length geometry? And I've always argued the sources. So of course I would always be drawing lines from sources. I can't believe this horseshit. I challenge anyone to find an instant of Gary even using the term path length difference between. Okay, I'll take that challenge. When I entered into discussions with him, so I'll show videos where obviously that phrase is being said. So yeah, maybe I didn't say it, but it was being said in the videos. All right, I wasn't drawing the geometry until I had the geometry, the new geometry, which is the sources being the surfaces. Obviously, I wasn't drawing Huygens geometry because I don't believe in Huygens. Okay, but anyway, entered into discussions with him, and he began changing his theory to fit the information I gave. So just a complete lie. What part of the theory changed, asswipe? It's always been, I've always said, so this is the truth since I was, 15, 13 years old. This is a photon. Never was a photon anything other to me than this, okay? It had to be a frequency of objects, all right? I mean, once in a while I would entertain some notion, well, maybe you can make it into one big object. But I never liked this, because I knew, a radio wave would be 10 miles of this. So yes, when forced to, I would try to make it fit into their particle. This is a particle, a light particle. But this is how I saw it, okay? When I was sitting in the classroom watching them draw this bullshit, okay, I was seeing particle, 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 particle. Anyway. And like I said, there's no other way. You can't even draw the double slit experiment and do any analysis without dealing with the path length difference. I mean, how do you actually draw the two slit experiment and say, if you're not a wavist, and obviously I never believed in the wave theory. I never drew waves and all that kind of crap. So it was always just about, we have a point where there's an on and an off and an on and an off. Okay, this is representing the on, this is the off. You have a bar pattern. Okay, so we just make little bars. And obviously, I've always been sort of obsessed with, what's the sources? And this, is obviously this is a path length difference, and that's what's in the math. The math is accounting for this path length difference, and then they'll draw this angle, and then they'll say this angle is the same as this angle. Blah, 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 blah. well, whatever. This is a minor point, but for him to sit there and say that somehow he advanced my theory is just such a pile of crap. Ugh, it's disgusting. He's trying to take credit for it. It's just the theory he's attacking, the one he'll say will never fly. Okay, he's giving me. He's sitting here trying to take credit for somehow having making some contribution. So isn't that ironic? He thinks it's all wrong, and yet he's trying to take credit for making a contribution. Yeah, fail. I don't really think there's anything else that I have to. I was going to deal with this radar thing, but I'll just save that for when we're doing the radar subject, I suppose. Yeah. So I think it's in here. They are in here. I must confess I never thought of it that way. Okay, so that was the troll comment that was so stupid, and Stephen engaged in a conversation about a stupid, idiotic premise, which is quite funny. Alright, so we already did this stuff. The inner surface pattern is sometimes 2 or 3 times as big as the neighboring nodes. The center node, yes, right. So he says this isn't true. The envelope center node is always 2x the size of the neighboring nodes. Exactly. And it's always kind of for the same reason, is because the fewer nodes you have, the more dramatic the difference in terms of, let's say you have a very small number of wavelengths fitting inside of something. The smaller the number, the more likely you're to have not an even number. So if the distance was 10 and you're dividing it by 7.5, so you can get very weird numbers. Well, that's probably a bad 100. So it's 100 and you're dividing it by 7.5. It's a lot less likely that you're going to have full wavelengths of difference. So obviously the nodes are not going to be in the center because there's not going to be a full wavelength of difference. There's going to be a remainder. You're never going to have a whole number divide into as a whole number, where you're likely to be a lot closer if you're dividing into 10,000. If you're dividing into 10,000, the remainder is going to be very small. All right, anyway. So, yeah, enough. Just horrible people on this planet. I think that's the only other subject, right? Yeah, okay. So you have to look up that guy. Steven says there was some kit you could buy or something, apparently in England, because I never saw it here, where they actually did the string thing, for the 2-slit experiment. That there was some sort of, like they would have a demonstration of the 2-slit experiment, and they'd actually tie string to the 2 surfaces, and you just move the string. I guess it was the 2 openings, so it was in the center of the 2 openings, the string. Which is the math that doesn't get the right answer, by the way. Okay, the math that isn't correct, that doesn't describe either pattern. If you make the 2-wave thing in the double slit experiment, you put the centers in the middle of the openings, that math, that geometry, won't describe either the envelope or the little bars. It'll get both of them wrong. Unless you make the slits narrower than a wavelength of light. So unless you go with infinitesimally small, and therefore you've ruined the path length difference, right? There's no path length difference between 2 lines from the same location, right? If I have the same location, I draw 2 lines, there's no path length difference to every point. It's exactly the same path length. And then when I make them a little longer, now I can have a path length difference. But it has to be longer than the wavelength of light for there to be more than one path length difference. All right, it has to be a wider opening. Okay, so I just shouldn't bother with the stupid troll comments. I really should just ignore them because, it is horseshit. It is sort of a waste of time. But, that's all they have is arguments. So let's understand, they don't prove anything with evidence. They don't link to anything called evidence. They don't link to anything called an experiment that demonstrates anything. They just make a vague idea that you're wrong. again, it's not that hard for them to play the 15-minute videos and point out how something in the video is not correct. Can't be. It's impossible to be. That is the truth. Why are they afraid to do that? If Stephen Bro would make a video defending whatever physics he has, I don't know. He's, like I said, he's defending Michael Van Briesen. So Michael Van Briesen is a full wooist. So if he's going to defend that woo physics, then I guess that's what he believes. He believes light's a wave. So why don't you explain it? Why don't you tell me it's a wave in what? Yeah. Why don't you show me some electric field experiments where you prove there's an electric field, whatever the fuck that is. Doing electrical field stuff. Well, anyway, this is so bad. Alright, so, yeah, that's enough. Alright, so till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot. So I did contact the PhD student guy again, and so we'll see if he has some count. I've asked him to watch at least one of those videos and critique it, and we'll see if he's willing to do it. And such. That's all, Again, their counter arguments are just rude, obnoxious, slanderous, lying sack of shit, trolly garbage. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with the arguments being made. So, till the next time, such. This has been a Draft Physics video presentation. This should work.